Last on Everdark, Balthazar, Christian, and Arceus had to play host to some of their Cali-vampire allies. The Cali-vampires almost immediately recognize Christian as a speaker to the dead, and Lisette gives Christian a gift of friendship, David's soul, trapped in a diamond. Now we turn back to Julian and Daemon. Everdark, Episode 64, Predators of the Deep. Julian looked over his shoulder to see if Daemon was following him into the night-black water of the ocean. He saw the vampire king wade into the sea to his waist before he dove into an oncoming wave and disappeared beneath the surface. The bright moonlight made it hard to track Daemon's powerful, naked form as he streaked towards Julian like a torpedo. It was only when Julian caught sight of those hands reaching for his ankles that he realized his master was playing shark. Julian twisted around and dove into the water himself just as he felt the brush of Daemon's fingertips along his skin. He kicked and rapidly swam into deeper water. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Daemon coming after him just by kicking his feet. The Vampire King's arms were tucked tightly against his sides, making him more streamlined. His black hair waved back from his beautiful face. His red eyes glowed like fire in the darkness of the water. He looked wholly beautiful and unearthly. Julian's heart lurched with a mixture of desire and a touch of fear. There was something implacable about Daemon in this environment, maybe because his master had not yet chased him before. A smile curled Daemon's lips, showing a snippet of sharp white teeth. Daemon's fangs were out, and a full-body shiver went through Julian. The next section of the podcast has been abridged. But though he really wanted Daemon to catch him, he had to play a little hard to catch. So he increased his speed while the Vampire King cruised after him. The bottom dropped out beneath them closer to shore than Julian anticipated. It went from 10 feet to 20, then 25, then over 30. Julian felt a slight chill, not from the cold of the water, but the thought of being so far out in the ocean at night, without clothes, without any idea of where he was going. But he and Daemon were not alone in the deep. Unlike before when he had scuba dived, Julian could feel all the life around him. He looked to his left just as a school of fish appeared. There were warm sparks of life in the ocean's cold blackness. His eyes were drawn to the seaweed that waved down below. It gave him the impression of flying through the sky over a forest rather than swimming through water over kelp. His keen hearing heard the thump of a heart, and he snapped his head to the side. He thought he saw the shadow of something large swimming through the kelp. He narrowed his eyes, squinting then and realizing that it was a dark purple eel that was almost invisible in the gloom. He found himself studying its long body as it glided through the kelp, and in this moment of inattention, hands curled around his waist. Julian jerked in surprise and then let out a watery laugh. Daemon had caught him easily. In order to comply with YouTube community guidelines, the next section of the podcast has been abridged. I am fine, my one. Look around you. What do you see? What do you feel? Julian blinked, but then allowed his senses to spread outwards again.
There's so much life. I can feel the city over there.
He pointed back in the direction they had come. The city seemed to glow with golden and red light. There were simply so many beating hearts there that it overwhelmed him. But the ocean did not have less, only that life was more spread out.
And I can feel the life and death struggle out here. Big fish eating smaller fish. Bigger fish eating the big fish. I can feel the cycle here stronger than the city.
Yes, Daemon nodded. There is less distraction down here. It will help you to focus on one thing and block everything else you do not need to know out. Though if you are too narrow, you will miss danger coming your way. Julian's senses had him turning towards several schools of fish, their iridescent scales flashing in the moonlight that made it down beneath the waves. Not only were there eels, but there were other predators too. Fish with powerful hinged jaws swam by them, wiggling powerful tails, ever looking for something to eat. He caught sight of a curl of a tentacle, visible for just a moment below him, and then it and a bright yellow fish were gone. He turned to Daemon in amazement. The vampire king was watching his face. There was nothing in the ocean that could hurt them like the land could, except the sunlight. We could always dive deeper than the sunlight could reach and be safe there, Daemon told him. I hear voices in the deep, perhaps more and different beings to know. They hung suspended in this strange silvery black place, a part of it and yet utterly separate. Julian's hand slid around Daemon's neck again, sheltering in his strength. The smile on his face was so broad that it almost hurt.
I thought I'd seen things before I met you, Daemon, but now I realize that my experiences have not even scratched the surface of what's out there. And that's only here on Earth. But what about the Everdark? I can't wait to go back there and see everything there is in those vast forests and cities.
Daemon smiled, leaning in and pressing their foreheads together. I will show you everything. It will all seem new to me as it is new to you. Sharing it with someone is so very different.
Did you and the other immortals do things together?
Julian wondered.
You seem so free and easy with Balthazar. There doesn't seem to be a formality of you being king and him being, well, he's a lord, I guess. A loyal retainer?
Eiros was always my friend first. I could be honest with him. I often went to him for his advice. His ability to read minds was greater than mine in some ways because of his understanding of people, Daemon explained. Eiros was fascinated with humanity, so he immersed himself in all there was to know about them. He even pretended to be one of them for millennia at a time. He watched civilizations rise and fall, not from afar, but as part of them. I could never fully hide myself, not even with the mirror ability. All felt in the end that I was not like them.
You are not like anyone else, that's for sure. That's not a bad thing, but I imagine it's been sort of lonely being so set apart.
Julian realized. It is the burden of being who and what I am. But then he was smiling again, hugely. But it is a light burden, especially now that I have you. I will never be alone again.
No, you won't. You're stuck with me.
Julian grinned back and felt something in his heart lighten.
I realized something about myself recently. I'm doing that a lot.
You are young. You will learn many things.
Don't look so smug.
Julian laughed, but then sobering, he said,
It's just really been brought to my attention how cut off I've been and haven't even known it. After I lost my parents, I didn't want to care about anyone else enough to miss them if they went too.
I wish I could give them back to you, Julian. It makes me angry that I was sleeping when they were taken from you. I remember their minds. Daemon's expression grew distant as he remembered them, and Julian caught glimpses of his parents through those memories. He saw them climbing over the many broad marble steps of Nightvallen. He saw his mother standing in front of one of the many freezers, copying it into a journal, tapping her lower lip with her pencil as she pondered what it meant. There was an expression on her face, telling Julian she was utterly engrossed. Her whole being was involved in trying to figure out what Nightvallen was, who had occupied it, and what they were like. Then he saw his father, using his climbing equipment to get to one of the many stone balconies. He saw his father's muscles strain as he lifted himself over the top of the stone balustrade, but he was stymied by the balcony doors being closed there too, just like they had been in the lower level. But these had frosted glass panels that he peered through. Julian knew his father was considering whether he would risk damaging the glass. But though his father was stymied, there was no look of frustration on his handsome, weathered face. Instead, he looked electrified. He would find a way in. He would understand everything about the inhabitants. Julian could feel that coming off his father in waves.
They were so happy in Nightvallen, weren't they?
Julian's mind voice was soft. I remember noting their intelligence and happiness as they discovered new things. Even though I was only barely aware of them, their minds were bright and their souls adventurous. Daemon said, "Come, let us look around this world before the chill becomes too much for you." The two of them swam down into the kelp. Daemon would move some of the fronds so that Julian could see the teeming life all around them. Seaweed caressed their bare sides. Curious fish came up and stared at Julian's face. He wondered what they thought he and Daemon were. Humans? Other fish? They were not afraid. Curiosity drew them nearer and nearer. Daemon linked their nearest hands together and urged Julian to swim simply by fluttering his feet. Soon they were cruising through the water like sleek fish themselves. Daemon took them out further from the shore. Julian could feel the water deepening below them. Soon, not even his keen vampiric vision could catch any sight of the bottom.
Where are you taking me?
Julian asked. To see something that you've never seen before in real life. To see another predator. Don't you sense her? Daemon explained. He slowed them both down and had them tread water. He pointed ahead of them and slightly to the right. Julian realized what Daemon wanted him to see when that familiar, yet frightening shape appeared at the edge of his vision. It was a large shark, about 8 feet long with a white tip on its topmost fin.
A great white!
Julian lurched backwards, but Daemon pressed a hand on the base of his spine to keep him still. Watch, Daemon instructed. We are not in danger. Julian's heart was thumping hard and his throat felt tight as he watched the graceful yet deadly form of the shark move through the water almost restlessly. He knew that they never stopped moving, or they would die. And then, coming out of the deep, was a school of fish. They were larger than the ones that he had seen near the shore. Their sides were pure silver, reminding him of silver dollars. He watched in amazement as with a powerful thrust of her tail, the shark was upon the school. The school of fish started to move in a column, almost like a fish tornado as the shark opened its jaws wide and swallowed several of them whole. The shark dove into the funnel of fish and took her fill over and over again until the school looked depleted. The stragglers streaked away from the sated predator. At that moment, the shark suddenly seemed aware of them and started to swim lazily towards them. Her black eyes looked soulless, even though Julian knew that was not fair. Sharks were made as they were made. There was no morality here, and what they did. They fed, they bred, and they were masters of the ocean for the most part. Julian drew nearer to Daemon's body, his back pressed tight against the Vampire King's front as the shark approached.
It's coming this way,
Julian said with more than a trace of unease. Yes, it is curious about us, but we are in no danger, Julian, Daemon assured him. Julian would have been holding his breath if he had been breathing as the shark closed the distance between her snout and his bare chest. Then, practically at the last moment, she veered to the right and glided past them within touching distance. In fact, Daemon reached out and ran his hand along the shark's side. Julian did so as well. The flesh was both rough and rubbery. He could feel the sheer life in this huge predator. He realized that he could hear the shark's heart and the whoosh of blood through her veins. If he closed his eyes, he could actually taste the blood of the fish she had killed in the water. Faint traces of that kill flowed into his nose and mouth. Hunger suddenly throbbed within him again. He opened his eyes and said,
Balthazar said that we couldn't feed from other beings, just humans. Is that true? Or can you do something different?
If I were limited to humans, I would have died long ago. My existence predates our arrival on this planet, Daemon told him. Now Julian's heart beat for a totally different reason. Daemon was revealing something about himself which was so rare.
So I could feed from a different species and be okay?
But Daemon was shaking his head sadly. Other than myself and humans, you likely would not be able to gain sustenance from other creatures. Though I am basing this only on what I know of other fledglings, not my own, clearly. But it is not something that we should test anytime soon.
I don't want to drink from anyone else other than you anyways. Like I told you on the beach, feeding and intimacy are wound together for me.
The Vampire King's eyes hooded at that moment. We should go in now. I wish to be in bed with you. Julian grinned. They swam back in companionable silence. But then Daemon stilled for a moment, and a sense of surprise flowed through him.
What? What is it?
Julian asked him, unable to feel anything strange at first. But then he sensed a vampiric presence on the beach, just 10 feet from where they would be exiting from the waves.
There's a vampire on the beach. But I don't recognize him.
Julian admitted. The three of us have not met, though we do know him, or rather, know of him. Daemon replied. His voice was neutral.
Who is it?
Daemon's red eyes met his. Caemorn Losus. Join us next time for episode 65, Soul in Stone. My dearest acolytes, I regret to inform you that this particular platform's Inquisition has decided that sexy vampire interludes are not within the bounds of community guidelines. Therefore, this episode has been cut to be acceptable to audiences of all ages. Not to worry. If you are interested in hearing the full episode, with all of the steamy parts included, you can purchase a monthly membership at raythereign.com. Not ready to commit to a monthly membership? Then please visit the shop at raythereign.com, where the full episodes are available for sale in audiobook format. I wonder just what it is that the community is afraid of hearing. Perhaps something they'd like. The community protests too much, methinks.